welcome to the basics of managing diabetes. I'm Paula Cunningham, State Director for AARP Michigan, and I am absolutely honored to bring this series to you for the last 2 weeks. This is our third week, I believe, of bringing to you a series on diabetes, which absolutely is a critical issue throughout the entire state and the country. And I'm also honored to be presenting this series with our sponsors and co-sponsors, and that is the Lansing, East Lansing Links Incorporated, as well as the Jack Pitts Health Foundation, two organizations that are doing incredible work in informing people about diabetes. And to host this series, we have the one and only, the icon in our community, a woman who's won all sorts of awards. She's the author of a book called A Seat at the Table, and she is a friend and also just someone who's passionate about this work, and that is Dr. Renee Kennedy, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Michigan Public Health Institute. Hello, Dr. Kennedy. Thank you for joining us today and for facilitating this series. We are so honored that you've taken time for what I know is a nationally busy schedule. You're all over the country anymore, promoting book, talking about disparities in healthcare and all sorts of very important issues that you are just helping to lift up throughout the entire country. But thank you for spending time with AARP and with all of our guests today to talk about diabetes.
Well, thank you, Paula. And I'm a Michigander at heart, so it is an honor to join you all. And as Ms. Cunningham said, we've been on this journey together, right? We started out a couple of weeks ago talking about this thing called pre-diabetes, and then we talked last week about sort of being newly diagnosed, and now we're into managing it through nutrition and health. And I always say that as a public health professional, I need your help. We all need each other's helps to be the healthiest community that we can be together. And that's what this dialogue is about. So we're going to dive right in. We've got this continuing focus, as I just described. We've got three presenters, and they're going to share really concisely some content, right? This is very in-depth. I have the pain and the privilege of being a bit of a timekeeper, so I might do some excuse me's through this, but I think our presenters know that they're held to about 10 minutes, and then we're going to have a wonderful dialogue where you come in and ask questions that are in your heart and mind, and we're so happy to have these experts at your avail. So let me just introduce our colleagues today. First, we have Bethany Mattis. She is a registered dietitian and nutritionist who received her Bachelor's of Science degree in dietetics and nutrition from the University of Dayton. She completed her dietetics internship with Henry Ford Hospital and her Master's of Science in nutrition from Central Michigan University. Bethany enjoys working with individuals and their families, right, to improve all types of nutrition concerns. Her special interests include diabetes management, preventive care, and healthful aging. She personally emphasizes client-focused self-goal setting and empowers her clients to directly participate in their nutritional care. Melissa Beaumont is an outpatient registered dietitian and nutritionist with Corewell Health. Melissa has worked extensively on both type 1 and type 2 diabetes in several outpatient clinics, including endocrinology, transplant, oncology, and obstetrics. She received her undergraduate degree in dietetics from Central Michigan and is currently finishing up her master's in nutrition and dietetics. Her focus in graduate coursework is on the role of Mediterranean diets in treating metabolic syndrome and diabetes. We're all going to be interested in what you learned. She believes small improvements in lifestyles and diet can reap major benefits in terms of diabetes treatment. And I agree with that. Small changes also are lasting changes. And finally, we have Dr. Saleh Al-Dasuki, and he is chief of the MSU, Michigan State University Division of Endocrinology and Metabolism. He's the program director of MSU's Endocrinology Fellowship Program, which he also co-founded. Throughout his career, Dr. Al-Dasuki has been active in teaching and clinical research and accumulating several scholarly achievements, and we are truly, truly honored to have him with us. So welcome to all of you, my new friends and colleagues. Thank you for being here to share your knowledge. And we're going to start off with Bethany's presentation first, and then pass it right to Melissa, and then concluding with Dr. Al-Dasuki. So let's jump right in. Bethany, have at it.
Hi, today I'm going to talk briefly about just introducing nutrition to make sure we're talking all on the same terms today, and then a little bit about insulin resistance before I pass it along. So all foods are made up of 3 macronutrients. That's carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Food has to contain at least one of them to be food. It can contain more than one, but that is the building blocks for our nutrition. So protein, this is something that helps keep our muscles strong. And that's essentially what we want. As we age, we want to be functionally independent. And so we need to continue to have a lot of lean muscle mass. We lose roughly 1 to 2% of our muscle mass yearly starting at age 35. So protein is really important to keep that muscle mass up. Protein also helps us feel fuller longer, and it actually helps keep our blood sugars more stable. So for example, it's a great tip to include some protein before you go to bed to try to keep your blood sugars stable overnight. Another macronutrient is fat, and fat does a lot of important things, but it kind of gets a bad rap. People either feel like they really need to follow a low-fat diet or a super high-fat diet, but the truth is likely somewhere in the middle. Fat helps pad our organs, it absorbs vitamins and minerals, it helps regulate our hormones and support a healthy brain, which again is very important as we age. There's nothing wrong with fat, but it does contain more calories compared to carbohydrate or protein. So basically a little bit goes a long way because it's about double the calories. We need it in our diet. We just don't need as much quantity-wise. One fat that I want to mention is omega-3 fatty acids. And this is an essential fatty acid that is really important for anti-inflammatory benefits. Essentially, the root of all disease is inflammation. So we want to have less inflammation in our body. There's also studies that show omega-3s can help us with our cognition as we age. It is hard to get enough omega-3s through our food alone, so that's something you might want to speak with your doctor about to see if taking an omega-3 supplement is right for you. And then carbohydrates, this is the body's main source of energy. It's what gets you grooving, moving, thinking, acting, doing all the things you like to do. All of our cells are going to use carbohydrates. They break them down into glucose for energy. So these do affect our blood sugar. This is what's going to raise our blood sugar. We need that effect to an extent. We just don't want to have too high of blood sugar. So the other thing about carbs is when we include enough carbohydrate in the diet, then we can keep the protein in our muscles, because otherwise our body is going to pull some of that protein out of our muscles to use it for energy. There's 2 main sources of carbs. There's simple, which means sugar has been added or nutrients have been removed, and this is a quick energy source. If I am running a marathon, then I'm putting sugar straight into my mouth because my cells need that energy fast. We have complex carbs, which are slower, longer lasting energy. So this is important because it's going to help release sugar slower into our bloodstream. One thing that complex carbs has that's very important is something called fiber. And fiber is technically a carbohydrate, but the body cannot digest it or absorb it like it does other carbohydrates. So instead, what does it do? It sits in our stomach and it keeps us feeling fuller longer, which is great. It also helps release that sugar slower from our GI tract into our bloodstream so that our diabetes control is better. And it helps bind with cholesterol in our bloodstream, and we get it out and through our feces. So fiber is very important. The average American gets about 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day. We actually need about 25 to 30 grams a day. So we should all be thinking about how can we add more fiber to our diet versus how do we need to take it away or take away other foods? It's more important about adding. The other thing I wanted to briefly introduce is that just talking a little bit about insulin resistance, and then I'll pass it along. So when we have type 2 diabetes, we often have an underlying condition called insulin resistance. And here's my analogy for that. You've probably heard that term, but maybe haven't been explained it. We eat something with carbohydrate, it goes down into our stomach and it breaks down into sugar. That's all carb. Doesn't matter if it's a Snickers or an apple, it's going to break down into sugar, and that's okay because that's the way our body uses it for energy. That sugar goes in leaves our stomach and goes into our bloodstream, and our pancreas is the organ that makes insulin. So you want to think of your pancreas like a car manufacturer, and the insulin it produces like cars. It's basically shooting cars into the bloodstream to pick up the sugar and drive it into the cell so that you have energy. That's beautiful. That's what we want to happen. When we have insulin resistance, our car manufacturer is still open. It's still producing cars, but the quality of the cars has gone down. So now I liken it to it. You eat something, your sugar raises, it shoots the insulin out, and one gets a flat tire, or one's engine overheats, or one picks up the sugar and drives it to the cell and the garage door button doesn't work. It's just not effective at mobilizing that sugar where it needs to go into the cell. So what does your body do? It's got to fix that. It says, okay, if the sugar or if the insulin I'm making, the cars I'm making aren't doing their job, then I'm going to produce more. If I have more available, then statistically, some of those got to be working and can get the sugar where it needs to go. Well, your body's not wrong. You eat this much carb, you need this much insulin to cover it. Now your body makes this much insulin to cover it. It's able to pick up that sugar, get it into the cells, but now what do we have? We have insulin or cars hanging out in the bloodstream with no passengers. And the body doesn't like that either. It says, whoa, 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 I have too much insulin. I must be starving. So what happens? Our liver kicks some sugar in, and our brain tells us that we're hungry. So what do? We eat, our body makes too much insulin again, and we have this cycle. So really at the end of the day, what we want is to eat in a way that our pancreas can do its job, and it doesn't have to work so hard. We need to spread that nutrient load out a little bit better. So that's all I have for today.
Bethany, I love the car analogy, you know, where the motor states. So that made that so clear to me. And I'm in the field, so thank you for that.
Awesome.
And we're looking forward to more clarity now coming from Melissa. So all yours, Melissa.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. So when we think of meal planning for someone with diabetes, there's two words that come to mind, and that's going to be balance and consistency. And there's many different strategies to control and lower your blood sugar, but an important goal to have is to start with individualized meal planning with a registered dietitian. And you can utilize practical tools for developing healthy eating patterns, and some may use the plate method, carb choices or exchanges, carb counting, measuring, food labels, or a mix of all of those. So with that, there are many different diet patterns that can be followed for blood sugar improvement, but the best diet is going to be based on your ability to adhere and maintain that diet pattern for long term while staying healthy. Most diet patterns, like the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet, are based on increasing your fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. In addition, your protein sources would come from lean meats and oily fish like salmon, and plant-based sources such as nuts, seeds, beans, edamame, lentils. So the beauty of adhering to more of a plant-based or Mediterranean style diet means that you're going to be increasing those plant-based proteins, which also have that great fiber content that Bethany mentioned, along with their protein. So together can really help keep your blood sugars in control. So the carbs that work for these type of diets are going to be high fiber complex carbs, such as brown rice, quinoa, wheat pasta, whole grains, oatmeal, fruit, potato. So as mentioned before, lentils and beans also provide this high fiber carbohydrate food, but also that protein content. For the protein content that you would want to choose are going to be more leaner options, such as boneless, skinless chicken breast, turkey, and again, that fatty fish like salmon or tuna, and those are all great options. Healthier fat sources would come from olive oil, avocado, nuts, and seeds. And consuming enough protein and fat with your meals are really going to help make a difference in keeping you full and satisfied. When we have a mixed plate of protein, fat, and carbs with fiber, our body takes longer to digest these nutrients down, which leads to a slower but more steady rise in your glucose, as opposed to having a meal that has too many refined carbohydrates and too little protein, veggies, and fat that will lead to a sharp rise in your glucose. So I wanted to share an example of a plate. Okay, so for example, I have 2 plates shown here. The plate on the left is a higher carb meal. So you see a large serving of spaghetti with sauce and 2 slices of garlic bread. It doesn't have really any protein or a vegetable serving. So this meal will cause a spike in your glucose, and it's likely going to stay high for a long time, as opposed to the plate on the right that is more balanced, that has about 1 cup of pasta and about 3 to 4 ounces of your lean protein. So here is grilled chicken, and then half of the plate is your non-starchy veggie, which is a spinach salad with peppers and tomatoes. Again, we know that protein, fiber, and fat take longer to digest. So a balanced plate is going to lead to more satisfaction with your meal and help you achieve optimal blood sugars. So a simple way to the other half of the plate is going to be with your non-starchy veggies.
We've got a little technical difficulty happening. Let's see if we can get Melissa back. And
then
maybe what
your
we
protein here is some chicken,
okay.
and then the vegetables on this.
All right, I think what we will do, because we know we live in this era of technology, that we will proceed and then continue. And worst case scenario, Bethany, I know you can cover some of the content that Melissa was covering. And so I think we'll just move to Dr. Aldasuki. How about that? And then we'll bring her back in as we can. Thank y'all for bearing with us.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you very much. And I will start with the slogan, technology is great when it works. So sorry, Melissa, that you had some issues. Well, thank you again, AARP, for inviting me to this wonderful webinar. I did watch the previous 2 webinars over the last couple of weeks, so I'll try to be very brief and not to repeat anything. And thank you, Dr. Kennedy, for the wonderful introduction and moderation here. And thank you, Bethany and Melissa. It's a pleasure to be with 2 dietitians. My daughter is a dietitian herself, so so it's very familiar to me. So let me, you can see my slides. Yeah, so that's about me as introduced by Dr. Kennedy. I'm a Spartan, but I'm a Shigander. So, and they go together. So I think the highlights would be, I will focus on, from the title of my presentation, maybe a little bit of a different take, but within the context of managing type 2 diabetes. And that is the concept of reversing type 2 diabetes. And what do we mean by that? And to take it from a perspective of targeting the what we believe is probably the root cause of type 2 diabetes. A strong correlation, not always causation, but a strong correlation, and that would be the focus. So this is a quote from an editorial by Dr. Fonseca, the editor-in-chief of Diabetes Care, about 15 years ago, when he published this editorial stating that the worldwide epidemic of type 2 diabetes continues unabated. And if you look at this slide, you can see that, I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but from the year 1994 to 2008, and of course, this is an old slide, but the trend continues. We can see almost a parallel increase of prevalence of both obesity and type 2 diabetes. And some people, came up with this concept of diabesity, which is the combined diabetes and obesity. And so, and this has been, kind of like confirmed by larger studies. This is one of these are, data from a couple of references here, as stated, which show a very convincing trend of the development of type 2 diabetes as the BMI increases in both men and women, but more drastically and more significantly in women, as you can see here, to the extent that when the BMI is in excess of 35, and in the previous lectures, it was defined, what my colleague, Dr. Akanbi, defined BMI as we know it. And so when it is in excess of 35, then the age-adjusted relative risk of type 2 diabetes in women becomes 93% and in men 42%. And so people have been coming up with this possibility. Is type 2 diabetes permanent? Is it irreversible? Is it something that like a one-way train ticket, or can it be reversed? And so people came up with the concepts of reversal, remission, cure. I don't want to spend more time in explaining each. We could probably go over that during the question and answers. But these are concepts that have been around for the last 10, 15 years. And people from around all the spectrum of the diabetes community, from the American Diabetes Association to different investigators, have been trying to maybe convince people that, yes, type 2 diabetes can be reversed, whether we call it reversal, remission, cure, but yes, it can be reversed. And a champion of that is Dr. Late Sarah Holberg, who passed away 2 years ago with advanced lung cancer at the age of 50, although she never smoked. But in this article that she published in the journal Nutrients in 2019, she actually collected a large body of evidence that diabetes reversal, type 2 diabetes, whether we call it, like I said, reversal, remission, or cure, can be achieved by bariatric surgery, very low calorie diets, and carbohydrate restricted diet or low carb diets. And I will end with this slide, and thank you again for your attention.
So many interesting points that I love the enigma of reversing versus curing. But we're going to jump back to our diabetes plate illustration that hopefully that Melissa was giving us. So we'll give it a shot. I know, Dr. Al-Dasuki, that your comments are going to bring a lot of questions to the front, and we're already starting to see questions pop in. So we'll pause one more second. I also happen to love registered dietitians because my undergrad degree is nutrition, and I opted out of the internship and the exam. So what can we say? But I have lots of nutrition knowledge, but I so respect dietitians
My
So
daughter
Melissa,
did that in Wayne State, the internship.
yes, so I think I don't know whether our colleagues can still share Melissa's slide, so that we can at least see that plate. And honestly, Bethany, if you want to comment on it, I know this is in your wheelhouse as well, to just talk about, let's just show that one slide with the diabetes plate, if we can do that.
It's up, Dr. Kennedy.
It is up. Okay.
And Melissa's
Boy,
there.
the little gremlins are getting us today, because I only see buffering. Why don't you have at it, Bethany, and explain that to us a little bit?
Melissa's back, so I'm going to let her go ahead.
Oh,
Yep,
okay,
I can
great.
go back. So sorry. I don't know what happened, but anyways, so here I wanted to show the diabetes plate. So this is from the American Diabetes Association, where you can see these portions here. About 1/4 of the plate is going to be that carbohydrate portion. 1/4 of the plate is going to be your protein, and then the other half is going to be those non-starchy vegetables. So going back to that previous example with the spaghetti meal, you could see that balanced plate that had the 1 cup of pasta with the non-starchies as half of the plate, and then the chicken as the protein. All right, and then I also wanted to show on the right side 4 examples of what these balanced plates could look like. So the top left is going to be a meal that has rice and beans as your carbohydrate. The chicken is going to be your protein, and a nice blend of non-starchy vegetables as your broccoli, peppers, onions as your non-starchy vegetables, and then the avocado as the healthy fat. The top right is a plate with the sweet potato as your starch, the grilled chicken as your protein, and then a nice salad with, it looks to be yellow squash for your non-starchy vegetables. The plate on the bottom left is going to be a Greek salad with a vegetable and bean ratatouille. And then the plate on the bottom right is a pork roast with tzatziki sauce and broccoli as your non-starchy vegetable and the potato as your starch. So again, this is where the balance principle comes in. Having a variety of the nutrients in each meal is going to be beneficial to blood sugar control and your gut health. And the different fibers present in your non-starchy vegetables are going to work together to help keep your blood sugars regulated. So again, ways for portion control is using the estimation method. So you could use a fist size estimation, which usually is about 1 cup measuring size, and that's going to be around 45 grams of carbohydrate. And then also the diabetes plate method is also a version of estimation as well, where again, that 1/4 of the plate is going to be around that 1 cup serving, or about that fist size. So I would use this if you're going to consume pasta, rice, quinoa, anything like that. You can also measure out your foods if you're comfortable with that, but this method may not be appropriate for most. But I always say, if you're able to measure out your carb portion, at least for the first few times, using that 1 cup measuring serving for foods that you eat often, you're going to be able to commit that to memory, and then it's going to lead to more of an estimation method down the road. Carb counting is going to utilize food labels and carb portion lists, and that's another way of controlling intake. And then for those people who don't specifically measure out those foods, using this plate method or utilizing, again, that fist size estimation method is going to be a great help for portion control and meal planning. And working with a registered dietitian is going to help teach you all of these methods and determine which one works best for you. All right, so my next slide here is one of the most important reasons for consistency and portion control is to help the blood sugar rise and fall in a consistent manner. And when we eat varying amounts of carbs with our meals, or too many carbs at a meal, you're going to see large spikes in your blood sugar, and your pancreas is likely producing too much insulin, which really isn't working the way it should, or it's not producing enough insulin. That leads to higher blood sugars overall. Ideally, we want to see the blood sugar rise and fall, just like the bottom part of the chart with the black line, where most of the blood sugars are going to stay within that 70 and 140 range. If you have a CGM or a continuous glucose monitor, you'll be able to see graphs like this based on your own data. The top gray line is going to be more of a reflective of a diet that has larger amounts of carbs at meals, where your blood sugar is already higher than what we want it to be, which is going to lead to worsening diabetes symptoms. And if you're prescribed insulin and taking the same amount of insulin per meal, consuming the same amount of portions for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is going to be the most effective in blood sugar control. Snacks in between your meals should be a smaller amount of carbohydrates. So that can be 15 to 30 grams of carb or even less, depending on your needs. Ideally, you want to pair that carb with your protein and your fat. So some low carb snack ideas can be as simple as a handful of almonds or a hard-boiled egg, a meat stick. Some snacks with carbs could be an apple and peanut butter, which is going to be around 15 to 20 grams of carbohydrate. You could also use a handful of carrots with a few tablespoons of hummus, which will give you great fiber. A Greek yogurt with a small handful of walnuts. 5 to 6 wheat crackers with a cheese stick. And all of these snacks pair that carbohydrate with that protein and fat. So that's going to help control your hunger levels in between your meals. And the American Diabetes Association also has a great website for recipes where you can find tons of meal ideas if you're looking to add more variety into your meal rotation. So I'm trying to pull up that website right now. It's diabetesfoodhub.org. Some sample menus that I was kind of thinking to give examples for that have about 45 grams of carbohydrate could be a turkey burger made with a whole grain bun with grilled zucchini as your vegetable and 1 cup of berries. So that meal together should be around 45 grams of carb. Another meal could be a stir fry. So your protein could be chicken, shrimp, or tofu with your stir fry vegetables and 1 cup of brown rice or quinoa. And again, that one should be around 45 grams of carb. Now, you do want to be aware if any of these meals do have sauces, you do want to check those labels or make sure that the ingredients you're using to make them don't have a lot of sugar additives. Otherwise, you have to count those carbohydrates. Another meal that's great for summer would be grilled chicken with lemon and steamed broccoli as your vegetable and a medium sweet potato. Again, to close out my part here, I wanted to emphasize the importance of variety with your meals, consistency, and balance when it comes to meal planning, but also utilizing the tools that best suit you in your life. And that may be carb counting, using carb choices or exchanges. That could be using the diabetes plate method or a blend of all of them. And I would definitely recommend diabetes diet counseling with a registered dietitian to help put together a plan that will work for you to improve your health. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for persevering through the technology glitch. And, really thank you to all of you. And as I sit and listen to you as a sociologist, I'm reminded a bit that there are lots of reasons why we in our country have eaten the way we've eaten. Some historical access, some cultural norms. There are a lot of things. But you all have given us really some very, very strong information now to begin thinking about how are we going to eat now? We've got some habits to unlearn, some new practices to implement. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, although we have these wonderfully experienced experts with us today, we want you to also build relationship with your primary care provider. So the things you're learning today, please discuss with your doc and think through what's the best strategy ahead for you. So there are lots of questions popping in. I'm going to throw out the first question to Dr. Number One Dad. Dr. Al Saduki. People are loving your sign over your head. Doctor.
That's a present from my kids.
Of course.
That's what they think.
Well, I won't comment that it's maize and blue instead of green and white. But I'm a Spartan.
You know what? I have never paid attention to that. You're right. That's a New York. That's a New York.
It's a New York sign. It is. I see that now. So the question is about, can diabetes actually be reversed? It's that point that I felt was going to resonate with the audience. So talk a little bit more about that, if you would.
Yeah, and yes, the answer is yes. Now the percentage or the rate of that can be debatable. We have been taught, I went to medical school 40 years ago, right, back in Jordan, and since then and until now, we have been taught that type 2 diabetes is a progressive, irreversible disease. Okay, and then ultimately the pancreatic beta cells will die out, and people will be on insulin for the rest of their lives. Now, a lot of evidence have shown that that is not the case. Yes, there may be certain cases that are probably misdiagnosed, or we have other types of diabetes, this MODY, LADA, autoimmune type 1 that is masquerading as type 2, and so on. Yeah, there will be a permanent insulin deficiency in that small percentage. But before the era of GLP-1 agonists and Ozempic and all of these, I myself, and even before I knew the work of Dr. Holberg and others, I started on my own 15 years ago, midway in my career, looking at overweight and obesity as the root cause of diabetes. And I started counseling my patient. I'm not a dietitian, I don't know, I cannot tell the difference between a small apple and a large apple, how much carb there is. But I used the best that I could explain to patients that the problem is in the carbs, and that if we reduce the carbs, then we can reverse a lot of the metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance, and then we can not regenerate, but we can awaken the beta cells that have been stunned and that have been, because of the glucose toxicity, that have been a little bit lazy, but they don't die. They will come back. And I have been able, in a large number of patients who believed in what I was saying, they started cutting down their carbs. They started losing weight. I started taking off their insulin gradually. And many of them, we reversed diabetes. So the answer is yes.
I love the definitiveness of that response, but also the context, that there are things you have to work on and work with your provider. And you spoke to this phenomenon of diabesity, that diabetes doesn't happen in isolation. It's connected to a lot of different, what we would call comorbidities in the field. So
yeah, and I want to add that I'm here talking about type 2 diabetes, not type 1, not LADA, not MODY. And all of these, the last three, collectively, they are maybe less than 5% of the burden of diabetes around the world. It's mostly type 2 diabetes, and that's what I'm talking about.
Thank you for clarifying that. So much of this is about what we're putting in our mouths, right? And there's a question from a participant that's asking about supplements. Now, some would describe us as sort of a pill popping society. Take this, it'll fix that, one little pill. So there's not a context or detail on the question, but if you would talk a little bit, our lovely dietitians, about supplements, what do you recommend?
I can answer that question. So there's a lot of supplements for diabetes that are marketed that say that they can help with your blood sugars, but a lot of the supplements on the market are not regulated or proven to be effective, and they also may have a lot of interactions with medications. So I would work with the primary care doctor to check, one, your levels first to see if you have any deficiency as far as vitamins and minerals, and then supplement as warranted. So for example, of some micronutrients that may show some usefulness in diabetes would be things like vitamin D and zinc and magnesium. However, if you follow that balanced diet, again, more of that Mediterranean style diet, you're going to be increasing the foods that have zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D already in your diet. So I would try to optimize diet first, check with your doctor to see if you can get your levels checked, and then supplement if needed, if those options don't work first. There are some other claims that, cinnamon may help, but I would suggest not taking the actual pill version of cinnamon. Again, it may not be regulated. It may interact with medications you're taking, but again, add that to your food as a flavoring. So that could go great with your breakfast on some yogurt or oatmeal. So I would definitely use the food first. And then again, you want to make sure that you optimize diet first and work also with your registered dietitian to help boost all of those levels.
Thank you. Yeah, we tend to want to find the easy solution. And while it's achievable, it might not be with the pop of a pill. But you mentioned yogurt. So that's a great segue to another question that we have from Ellen that's asking about non-fat yogurt versus whole fat yogurt, the cholesterol levels. Is there any connection in your mind that should be considered in managing diabetes?
I'm happy to jump on this one since Melissa
Thank
just
you.
answered. So the consideration between the two is that obviously one is going to have more fat content and one doesn't. The rationale behind including full fat yogurt is that balance that Melissa emphasized during her presentation. When we have the macronutrients together, full fat yogurt is going to contain fat, protein, and carbohydrates. So it is complete in the sense that it has all three macronutrients. And when we have all three macronutrients, it slows our digestion. So our blood sugar spikes less quickly. A low-fat yogurt has the protein to kind of tether it a little bit, but it can keep you fuller longer if you go with the full fat. Yes, all food or any food that comes from an animal product is going to have some cholesterol in it. We want to modify in some situations where we can. But it's more about not adding so much added fat to our, if we can skip adding butter to something and just have the cholesterol be in the actual food product that we're eating, it's looking at the balance through the course of the day. So eating one food that's considered higher in cholesterol isn't going to be too much dietary cholesterol in the big scheme of things when you look at the whole course of the day. So if you notice that you feel more satisfied when you have whole fat yogurt and you snack less as a result, then we're probably in better shape than skipping that in the beginning.
That it's a little counterintuitive, but I love the way you've explained that to us, because again, we get these messages, go with low fat, go with low calorie, and it's not that simple. It's this balance of nutrients. So thank you for that. Let's talk to our vegetarians. We have a question from Susan about rice and beans. Is that considered a protein and a carb? What's the story that you all would perceive in that for vegetarians?
Yep, for a vegetarian diet, first you want to see what are some of the protein sources that you do eat that may come from an animal source or be animal-based. So if you eat fatty fish or fish in general, that can also be a protein. But as far as the like the rice and beans, there are going to be protein content available within the beans. And I would choose more of like the brown rice or the quinoa just to get a little bit more of the protein. We still do have to monitor those portions. But again, having that fiber content, even though maybe your carb intake may be a little bit higher, that may help still keep your blood sugars balanced just because of, again, those fibers help slowing down the rise of glucose. So it's really, working with your dietitian and determining where your protein sources can come from. Can you incorporate some more nuts and seeds also with those meals, which will give you a little bit of that protein and a little bit of fat for satisfaction? And also things like tofu and eggs and cheese can also be an option within a vegetarian diet, depending on what foods they include and exclude.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Small changes. Small bites, small portions, small changes. Let's see here. I'm scanning our questions coming through. Yes, diet and exercise. Talk to us about the importance, how important is it to exercise if you have diabetes, or I'm going to add to that, can we manage it just with our diet, or do we really need to exercise? What's your recommendation?
Um, who will answer? I don't know.
Go right ahead, Dr. Alice.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, well, yeah. So, we burn carbs and sugar through the muscles, right? I mean, this is actually the healthy way of burning carbs when it goes directly into the muscles rather than going to the liver and would make glycogen and then more adipose tissue and then fructose and fatty liver. We want the muscles to actually mostly take most of the sugar as a fuel. And of course, some will go, or a lot will go to the brain and the heart and all the other organs. But the main burners are actually the muscles. Yeah, exercise as tolerated, walk the dogs, walk outside, keep moving, try not to, even if you are working on a desk, like some people, their work involves like construction workers, there are physical work that actually would utilize muscles. But if somebody has a stationary kind of work and life, then yeah, exercise is a very important tool of burning carbs and calories. The problem is, there is always limitation. How much? I mean, if somebody is a basketball player, yeah, they can eat 6,000 calories and burn them, right, in one game. Yeah, because they move, hundreds of muscles, 1,000 times. So, but for the average person, the more is the better. But of course, there are health limitations, there are joint problems, there are heart problems, and so yeah, absolutely, it's very important.
So that's we hear so much about the pancreas and insulin. We don't think as much about muscles. So thank you for that reminder and building the muscle. So yeah, taking a walk even. I remember my own journey in this process, and my physician would say, go take a walk after dinner. Help your pancreas out a little bit. So in other words, use those muscles. I think that's really, really important for us to think about. Let's see here. Oh, this is again a question about what we're putting in our mouths, and this focuses on nutrition today. So a question about snacking, nighttime snacking. What suggestions could you make to help us break that habit or manage that resisting nighttime snacking? And is there something going on in our bodies that's contributing to that urge that you're aware of?
Yeah, nighttime snacking can be a problem for a lot of people. Partly food is for enjoyment. It's not just for nutrition, right? So we associate it with unwinding at the end of a long day or things like that. And those can be valid reasons to eat too. I think that there's a little bit of different ways you can go about this. One, there is a concern that if we are under restricting our nutrition earlier in the day, that we're very hungry at night and that we overdo it, or some people might even binge eat in the evenings. So making sure that we're well nourished and not over restricting earlier in the day, it can make a significant improvement in the urges to eat at night. I also think it's about the way we look at food. When we say we can't have something, it's off limits, no, it's bad, we categorize it like that, it becomes extra rewarding in our brain. It's unrealistic to say I'm never going to have a piece of chocolate again. I love chocolate, right? So it's more I need to set a boundary around that chocolate and decide how do I want to include that in my life. So that might look like, hey, I'm allowed to have a piece of dark chocolate with my lunch because that's going to satisfy me psychologically. But with that lunch, I also have vegetables and protein and a little bit of carbs. So I'm nourished in addition to that. And then I also think it's about keeping your blood sugar stable. So, our blood sugar is the highest 2 hours after we eat. It starts to come down to a normal low, like 4-ish hours after that point. And so we want to, it's normal to kind of feel hunger and fullness every 3 to 5 hours or shoot the difference like 4 hours. So if you're eating dinner at 5 and you're not going to bed at 11, maybe it's reasonable you have a snack before bed. So you might just need to account for that. and say like, I want that to be a balance of a little bit of carbohydrate and some protein to keep my blood sugar stable overnight.
Thank you. So this is, I think, a related question. There's a question about someone who has diabetes and is skinny, very skinny. They comment about metformin, but I think this tension of, we think obese people that battle obesity are the ones that are experiencing diabetes, but that may not necessarily be true. Can Dr. Aldasuki, can you speak to that misperception?
Yeah, thank you. This is a very complicated, topic. So when I mentioned the association of obesity and overweight with type 2 diabetes, and again, I want to emphasize that we are excluding type 1, who are usually thin people, and MODY and genetic and other types of diabetes, collectively less than 10%. And for the most part, they are probably they don't have weight problem. So we are left with diabetes. Now, for thin people, if we check their C-peptide, which is the amount of insulin being produced by the body, and it is not zero, meaning that they make insulin, because if somebody who is, let's say, thin has zero C-peptide, they cannot live, because that means that they will go to the ER within 12 hours with diabetic ketoacidosis. So then they must have insulin, and we check the C-peptide, it is detectable, but there is a little bit of resistance. So the BMI sometimes can be deceiving, because what matters is the adipose and the fat tissue inside the belly, inside the abdomen, into the liver. So somebody may not even be overweight. Like, for example, some people, like from Southeast Asia and so on, they don't have to have like a BMI of 30, for example, to have diabetes. They could have it at 23 or 24. Why? Because we're talking about the adipose tissue in the viscera, inside, like between the bowels and around the pancreas and the liver and into the liver. Yeah, these people can have type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. Yeah, this is a smaller percentage than the association with overweight and obesity.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm thinking so much. This I'm thinking about my family. I'm thinking about myself. And so you guys are giving us some great stuff. I'm going to sort of combine two questions under the umbrella of too much of a good thing is not a good thing. There's a question about can you have too much fiber? But there's also a question about protein, and particularly as people are aging and maybe losing muscle mass, do they need to increase their protein intake? And can you eat too much protein in that same regard? So this tension between 35, losing muscle mass starting at 35, and if you're now 75.
I can comment. Yeah, I can comment on it just because I was the one who brought up that data. So if we're having a good source of protein with our meals and our snacks, and our protein intake is likely adequate to maintain our muscle mass. More is not always better. We don't have to hit it extra hard to stimulate muscle growth. Oftentimes we aren't eating 3 to 4 ounces of meat at a sitting, or a good source of protein. We're just grabbing a handful of crackers and running out the door. We're not having that balanced snack. The muscles are a little bit of a reservoir. I liken it to I'm sorry, I'm really bad. I like analogies. Sorry, bear with me. I liken it to like a sponge, right? If I pour water on my sponge, it absorbs it, right? So if I have my muscles a sponge, I pour protein on it, it absorbs it. Great. That's what I want. Oh, I keep pouring water on it or protein on it. What happens? It's already at max capacity. It runs right out, and our storage in our body is fat. So although the excess protein, if we exceed what we need in the moment, is going to get stored as fat. Now, as aging adults, we do want to deposit protein into our muscles multiple times throughout the day. We can do that. It's not just once and then it rolls over to the next day. So if you're including a source of protein, it doesn't have to be a ton. I would say around 10 grams at snacks, 20 to 30 grams at meals, then we are doing a good job of keeping our muscle mass up. We also have to use those muscles, as Dr. A was saying. You have to put stress on those muscles in order to promote them to grow and to be used. So we do need to be resistance training as older adults at least twice a week, and doing some balance training as well, which is also going to help us use those muscles.
Thank you. I don't think there's anything that you all have shared with us that's unattainable. Sometimes we allow ourselves to feel overwhelmed, but we can do this. And we can do it particularly in partnership and in relationship with each other. Find a buddy, an accountability partner, and talk about your diets together, exercise together, ask questions together, and have these discussions. There are so many other questions on here, and some of them, like a question about cornstarch and will that keep my blood sugar stable? There, just as Melissa was saying about the cinnamon and the supplements, all of these things. Vet them with your provider and with an experienced and licensed professional like our registered dietitians. There's questions about Ozempic and Mounjaro, which we see are all in the news right now, and just so many, many other things to consider. And unfortunately, in 60 minutes, we don't have the time to do so. But I want you all to remember that you have access to this video again, to go back, jot down more questions for you to talk to your provider. You can go back and see the first of the series on prediabetes, the second of the series on now you've been diagnosed, what's next, and watch them on demand, discuss them with friends and with family. And if you want to receive emails from AARP, if you've not been getting them, please do go right online, www.aarp.org, and you're going to backslash and type in yes to the number 2 email. Yes to emails. There are so many resources, and we can work together. I said this before, that public health is what we do as a society together to assure our health and our well-being. And so I really want to give deep thanks to Dr. Sala Aldasuki, to Ms. Bethany Mattis, to Melissa Beaumont. And if there's ever anything we can do to support you or continue to ask questions, please see AARP as a resource and a partner in your health, your healthy aging, and the well-being of your family. Thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, and I really enjoyed this enriching discussion.
Thank you. You all have a great rest of the day.
It's nice meeting you and Dr. Kennedy. Thank you. And
yes, nice to meet everyone.